This is Live Life Love. This is a disclaimer that everything you are to hear in this podcast is my own opinion, and it is up to the listener's discretion whether or not they follow the advice that I give. Hello, and welcome to the Live Life Love podcast. This podcast is all about living a life you love and living your life full of love. And I am sorry that I have taken a little bit of a break from posting over the past 2 weeks. Ultimately, I've just been super upset and impacted by recent news events as a U.S. citizen currently. So I have just been super upset about that and have not been able to bring myself to recording. And the main thing I wanted to talk about on this episode was going to be about failing your New Year's resolutions. But I also, in light of recent events, I also want to talk about the healthy ways that you can deal with kind of, we live in this digital age where, maybe we're seeing images or essentially getting flooded with a lot of cortisol in our systems that as human beings, we weren't designed to kind of be in this constant stress or, like if you are in stress as like a human way back when, before technology, you were probably running or, there was some kind of physical response to that stress. And so I wanted to emphasize that when faced with stressful information or information that is distressing, it's important to create a physical outlet for whatever emotions you are feeling from that, whether that's going for a run or just moving your body or screaming into a pillow, just something to release all of that cortisol and negative emotions, because when you choose not to move and you have all this cortisol and you're not moving, your brain is essentially interpreting that as you choosing to do nothing. That's going to bleed into the rest of your day-to-day of essentially like a freeze response to all the stress that you are experiencing. So if you are also a U.S. citizen and you have been experiencing that kind of freeze response, I recommend pushing yourself, or not necessarily pushing yourself, but taking action and moving in some way to counteract all of these negative emotions that you are feeling. And as always, I am going to recommend journaling, writing down your feelings. I know I say this a lot, but I wasn't even following my own advice here. And I had a lot of pent-up emotions that I wasn't really processing. So I needed to get those out on the page. And I do want to say that what has been happening in the U.S. is really hard, can be really, really upsetting. And absolutely, if you feel called to take action or not, that is up to you, of course. But if you do that. But also know that things seem bad, but they're certainly worse in other countries. But we should absolutely, if you want to take action, take action. But you feel like the world is ending. I just want you to know that the world is not ending and that we still have power as citizens and things like that. You look at Iran, for example, where protesters are being killed in the thousands, which is starkly different from what is happening in the U.S., and we're not to that point yet. Obviously, we don't want to go down a path where we end up at that point, but I do want to say this just to let people know that what they're feeling is okay and validated, but also putting it into perspective a little bit, because when you're constantly in that echo chamber of, oh, this is, terrible, like we're in a fascist regime. I don't think we're in a fascist regime yet. There are still other politicians, Congress, and this is where your vote really matters in the midterm elections. So just want to say that, we are still a democracy, or a representative democracy, so you can still vote for people to go into office who can counteract and hopefully make some progress towards switching the path that it seems that maybe the U.S. is going down right now. Now, on that, I am going to assume that if you live in the U.S., maybe some of the recent news has made it harder to complete your New Year's resolutions. And I want to remind everybody that, when things are terrible around us, sometimes that's an even better time to make sure that you are following through with your own personal goals, because ultimately you can only contribute as much as you are healthy and you are mentally in a place where you can contribute. And the way you get there is by taking care of yourself, and you don't necessarily need to feel guilty for that right now. And so let's talk about failing your New Year's resolutions. And I am going to say that, a lot of people probably have failed their New Year's resolutions at this point where we are entering February, or they may feel like they are failing their resolutions, but I can tell you that you have not failed. You have not failed your New Year's resolution. There are still 11 months left in the year. So you have plenty of time to still work, and you have plenty of time to make yourself still reach that goal. Just because you may feel like you failed, I encourage you to move away from that all or nothing mindset. You don't want to be, just because you missed 1 day or 2 days or a week at this point, that doesn't mean that you still failed. You still have so much time to meet that goal. And if your goal was something like do X or do Y every single day of the year, ultimately that might not be the most realistic goal. And all you can do, if you just give up now, you're not going to be making any progress at all, versus if you pick yourself back up, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and go back into everything, really start over or reassess whatever your New Year's resolutions were in order to be able to complete them. The year is not over, it is still beginning, and if you have to fail at your New Year's resolution 10 times, every single month, at least you are still doing it for that first week. Let's say you fail after the first week of every month. That is still 12 weeks more or 11 weeks more than you would have if you gave up after you failed that very first week. And so you will make progress, even though that progress is smaller and maybe not exactly what you had set out to do. You are still closer to meeting that goal than you would be if you didn't, pick yourself back up and try again. And failure is not always a bad thing. It is the way that we learn. It's how we learn what doesn't work so that we can start doing what actually works. And so when you fail, try to identify why you failed. I do want to remind everybody that if you have a goal of going to the gym every day, you can very easily burn yourself out. I don't think that it is reasonable to go from 0 to every single day. There has to be some kind of buildup there, or your body is just not going to be able to keep up with you. And that is not a bad thing. You need to have days of rest. Your body needs rest to recover. And so I do want to emphasize that, because I know exercise is one of the most common ways, or the most common New Year's resolution that people have. And so it's important to just, put that in context and don't set goals for yourself where you're setting yourself up for failure. And I know New Year's resolutions are a big deal. It's like a new start, a new you, but ultimately a new you isn't going to come overnight. And it's a resilience and consistency to those goals that is ultimately going to get you where you want to be. And even just little tiny steps in that direction is better and more sustainable to get you to actually where you want to be. And I just want everyone to remember that. If you have failed, that is absolutely okay. Now it's time to reassess, figure out what went wrong, and rewrite your goal or whatever, and just start again. And maybe you're going to fail again, and then you just start over again. And so it's that willingness to start after you fail again that will ultimately mean that you actually make your New Year's resolution, versus giving up or feeling like, it's over. And the new year, it's not the only time that you can make resolutions. You can make them at any point in the year. It's really just up to you. I know it feels like a great time to do it, but Just because you don't do it doesn't mean the world is over. And if you have been super consistent with your New Year's resolutions, good job on that. Keep going and know that when you do fail, which I think most people do fail, remember that, like most people fail at some point at whatever they set out to do, or mess up or miss a day. But ultimately, that is not the end. And you have so much more going for you and more than you ever know if you want to be that person you want to be. And I think that's super great. And obviously, there are things that come up in life that make it harder to stick to your goals. And I just recommend everybody give grace to themselves when those things happen, but also still hold themselves accountable to start over or, get back on that horse, as I like to think inside my head, of like, you fall off the horse, you gotta get back up or you're going to be trampled. So ultimately, if you want to make that change, if things come in that way, completely okay. But it's up to you to decide, I'm going to get up. I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to get this thing done. And that is when you're going to start seeing results and start actually completing your New Year's resolutions or seeing measurable change from the beginning of the year to the end of the year when you don't give up. Because ultimately, having a goal that is doing something every single day, what is the point of that? How are you going to measure those results? I think ultimately the goal of a New Year's resolution is to see a change that happens consistently over the course of the year. That's more likely to happen with little small changes over the course of the entire year than one big change that you give up on at the beginning. So I hope that I have encouraged everyone, and I hope that you maybe feel inspired or like you have some kind of path forward, especially if you live in the US and you're feeling overwhelmed by recent news or whatever. But thank you so much for listening, and I will try my best. I'm really, really going to try to make sure I don't go 2 weeks without posting again. I'm going to be really, really consistent on this. And yeah, hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for listening to the Live Life Love podcast. As always, please share this episode with your friends and family. Follow the podcast on Instagram at Live Life Love Pod or visit the website livelifelovepodcast.com. You can find past episodes wherever you like to listen, and new episodes come out every Tuesday. Have a great day.